Well, how long have you worked here?
Well, I've been here for years, about 23 years or more, and it's a kind of dump that nobody else would want, but I can work here. These are my few abstract pictures here, and because I use the walls and things just to test the colours out on.
Yeah. And you like leaving all this stuff there?
Well, I do. I just leave it there. I work much better in chaos. I couldn't work if it was a beautifully tidy studio. It would be absolutely impossible for me.
Why do you think that is?
I have no idea. Chaos, for me, breeds images.
I first met Francis Bacon in the mid-60s when I went to a party with a couple of friends of mine. We were working together on an arts program for BBC Two, and it was a posh party in Knightsbridge, and in a very glamorous house. And there was this man sitting there, very self-possessed, glass of champagne, fuming, a bit like the devil's brew, as far as I remember. So that was that, and time moved on, and I saw him a few times again. So to cut to the chase, I wanted to make a film with him when I started the South Bank show, and he played hard to get. He was hard to get. He'd made 1 or 2 films before, and they were good, 1 or 2 conversations. But I thought we could do something, our team, that hadn't been done before. And I think we made a cracking film. Remembered a bit too much now for the scene at the end where we'd had a little too much to drink, or a bit too much to drink. Oh, much too much to drink, okay. But there's other things in that film which hadn't been seen of Francis's work and his thinking before.
When you come to a canvas, have you an idea in your head as to what the finished image is going to be before you start?
I have an overall image of what I want to do, but it's in the working that it develops. And you see, it's a very difficult problem, this now, as I'm a figurative painter, and I think that that you can't any longer make illustration because it's done so much better by the camera and by the cinema. So you have to really concentrate on making, you have to, I thought about it very clearly this morning, wrote it down, and I put it in my pocket. Now I can't remember what I was going to say. Can I use it?
Yes, do.
What I thought of saying. And I just said, not illustration of reality, but to create images which are concentration of reality and a shorthand of sensation. Well, there's lights been given a bad time. You know.
Is this a place you come to a lot here, the Colony Room?
Yes, I came in when it first opened. I had never known Muriel before, and we seemed to get on very well. And she said to me, Francis, I don't want you to work here, but just bring in people, or people that you know or you think would like to come in and that kind of thing. And I'll give you £10 a week, and all your drinks free. So that was very, very helpful to me. It was a place where people came in and they were very free and they seemed to lose their inhibitions. It was as though it was like a sort of pool in which they forgot what their inhibitions were, and it was very, very lively and amusing. I never use makeup. Keep your makeup to yourself, you old cow.
What you like to do, I believe, is to somehow let your unconscious take over. Is that right?
That's as far as one can. I would like it to, because after all, there's this deep sea which we call the unconscious, which we know nothing about. I always hope the most wonderful images will emerge from it.
At the same time, though, you believe in things being deeply ordered, don't you?
Yes.
So what?
I believe in a deeply ordered chaos.
And how do you
my work.
How, when you're in front of the canvas, how do you try to arrive at that? What do you go through to try to arrive at that?
Well, because the unconscious things that I try to, the images that I try to make, I still, at the same time, want them to look very ordered.
But you don't want to be in control of them.
Well, this is a great problem. In the very first place, When they come up, you're not in control of them. But when the image seems to emerge, then to make it, you have to control it. But in control, you see, this is where with painting, it's so difficult painting in oils, is you make an image and it's changing all the time. And then it's to do with your own instinct and sensibility, which turns it one way or another. That doesn't mean that I haven't got an overall idea of the type of things I would have liked to make, but I don't know how to make it.
Yes. So you come in with an overall image which you don't want to define except through working towards it.
Yeah, no, but that's exactly how it is.
Yes. That's putting yourself at risk all the time, isn't it?
Well, don't you think you have to? At least as an artist, you always have to. I mean, if otherwise you turn into an academician.
Are you excited when you're painting, or are you absorbed, or are you depressed, or what? Do you have a particular mood, or does it change a great deal?
Well, of course, it changed like all our moods.
Yeah.
It changes, yes. But I have a very sort of optimistic nature, so I always think something's good's going to turn up, or exciting.
When you're actually following the oil, as you say, you make a brushstroke one way and that takes you one way. Obviously, that's quite dangerous, and it might take you a way that you find you don't like at all. What happens then?
Well, very often that does happen, and just means destroying the canvas.
You actually destroy the canvas?
I do generally, yes. Mm-hmm.
Francis decided one day that he was going to take us to lunch, us being a couple of people on the crew, and a man called John Edwards. He was much younger than Francis, young enough to be his son, a handsome young East End boy, really. Francis was very proud of him. He took photographs. So he went to Wheeler's in Old Compton Street in Soho. Francis was the host. And this Wheeler's was a fish restaurant, and the menu was ridiculously big, just big to look at, I suppose, but that big. So John opened it, looked, shut it, put it down. I said, that was quick. He said, yeah. So you know what you want? Yeah. He said, I want caviar and lobster. They always have it here. I said, no. He said, I can't read. Francis is teaching me to read. He wants me to write my name for his will, but I can't read. And Francis heard that and beamed, as if John had got a first at Oxford. It was terrific. It was really lovely.
I did do a big triptych of John, which I think is one of the portraits that I've done that have really sort of rather worked. And some of them he's fairly deformed, but nevertheless, I think they look like him.
I believe that sometimes you use a rag a lot on the canvas, you use brushes, scrubbing brushes to scrub on, you actually throw paint sometimes at canvas. Can you talk about the relationship you have with the canvas in that very physical sense? Why is it important to you to sort of battle with it in that way?
Because if you've ever seen somebody painting a wall, or if you ever paint a wall yourself, you will see the first mark that you make, and where the brush makes that mark, it has a vitality. That when you've got the overall thing created, it's lost.
And so you want that first mark, every mark to be that first mark, as it were?
Yes.
What's to be gained by throwing paint literally at a canvas?
Well, that was, I only did in a few paintings. I was sick of the look of them, I just threw a lot of paint on them. And they turned out, well, they turned out, as they did. I quite liked them.
The highly sensual paint, the charged use of the paint was live stuff. I mean, when you look at a constable, you can smell the Suffolk mud, and when you look at a bit of bacon flesh in his own way, you know, you can more or less smell the flesh. You know, it's the opposite of Botticelli. You know, there can be scars or spots, or I mean, it's very real human flesh. It's that physical thing made by the human hand that has the charge and yet the vulnerability. I mean, I find the figures, the people in Bacon's work, very vulnerable.
I don't try to read my work. I don't really know what it means. I only know what it means to me formally.
So you're resisting telling a story. I mean, that is not telling a story.
Very, very much so. I don't want to tell a story. I have no story to tell. I like the starkness of the image. I want it to give me a shock. Now, shock, you could say, is a form of expression. But what expression it is, I don't know. It's a visual shock. It's not a shock about... it's not a shock that you could get from a story. It's just a visual shock.
So what is it that you're presenting when you've finished?
Nothing except what people want to read into it. Nothing.
That day's filming started in his studio. Went to do studio, did some work in the studio. Went to have a meal, had a meal with some stout red wine. He always had a good lunch, filled up red wine room. And then we cleared the restaurant and had another lunch, pretending we were having lunch with other people so they could shoot it properly, and had nothing to eat but more to drink. And it was tricky, but it was reasonably coherent. And when I saw it in the cutting room, I thought, well, there's something about this that really is Francis Bacon. He isn't making a fool of himself. If anybody's got egg all over her face, it's me, and that's all right. And I think this is really like him. And it's not cheating, it's not being nasty. So I rang him up, or wrote to him, or whatever, however I contacted him, then I can't remember. And he said, oh, do what you want, darling. So we put it in.
I don't feel I'm creative. I'm one of those people who has received a lot of luck and lots of chance. Because
Why is chance more important than conscious intellect? Conscious intelligence?
I've made images that intellect would never make.
There's a painting called Painting 1946, which somehow summarizes what you became known for. And it was a painting of dead flesh, of meat.
In that particular painting, I tried to paint a bird falling into a field of grass. And then all the kind of marks I'd made on the canvas suddenly suggested this painting, which had absolutely nothing to do with it. And how this painting came about, I can't tell you. But it just happened to come about, and then I suddenly started to paint the meat, and this great image, which is of a kind of dictator, and then the meat around him, it just happened to evolve, and it evolved very, very quickly. And how it happened, I don't know. It is one of the most unconscious paintings I've ever done.
Why the meat? I mean, what attracted you to that?
I used to think how marvelous these extraordinary carcasses are hanging in great butcher shops, hanging from the wall, how amazing their color was, how beautiful they looked.
You say they're beautiful. A lot of people looking at your paintings think of them as horror images, images of shock, images of blood and dread, and not beautiful at all.
Well, the thing is, what could I make to compete what goes on every single day? If you read the newspapers, if you look at television, if you know what's going on in the world, what could I do that competes with the horror that's going on? Except that I have tried to make images of it, and I have tried to recreate it and make not the horror, but I've tried to make images of realism.
So when we look at your paintings, we're looking at the real world?
Yes, I believe you are. After all, between birth and death, it's always been the same thing. There's always been this aspect, always, of, not aspect, but it's what it is. It is the violence of life. I always think that they're images of sensation. After all, what is life but sensation? What we feel, what happens.
What happens at the moment?
What happens at the moment?
Do you think there's anything exists apart from the moment?
No. I believe in nothing. We are born and we die, and that's it. There's nothing else.
So what do you do about it?
I don't do anything about it.
You paint it?
I just drift.
No, Francis, you try to paint it.
I try to paint it, yes, but you talk about my own life. But my own life is just a drifting life of going from bar to bar and drinking and that kind of thing. My impulse is my life. My impulse is that I'm an old man, but I'm profoundly optimistic about nothing.
How can you be optimistic about nothing, Francis?
I can be.
Why?
Just existing for a moment. Existing today makes me optimistic.
Optimistic about what?
Nothing. I'm optimistic about nothing. I'm just born with that kind of optimistic nature. I'm just optimistic about nothing.
Bacon always said the same things over and over again. Not a bad idea. And it is his throwing away of things. I mean, I remember he was asked the question if he hadn't been a painter, what he would like to have been, and the expected answer was that he was going to say he'd like to have made films. And so he asked if you hadn't been a painter, what would you like to have been? He said, a mother. I mean, you know, the wit, and that intensity which came across in himself, and that intensity of the work.
When you're painting yourself, is there any sense in which you're painting an emotional condition? I mean, those portraits after the death of George Dyer look extremely tragic.
Well, I suppose that what you do is coloured by the kind of psychological state that you're in at certain times, but it would be an unconscious thing and not a conscious thing, because after all, I'm not at all an expressionist painting. I'm not trying to express anything. I wasn't trying to express the sorrow about somebody committing suicide or something like that when I did those portraits of myself, but perhaps it comes through without knowing it.
Do you think about death much, or?
I don't think much about it. I mean, I could say that you're always aware of it. I mean, you're always aware of it. It's just round the corner for you. But I don't think about it because there's nothing to think about. When it comes, it's there. You've had it.
Will you tell me about the history of painting flesh, Francis?
Well, perhaps one of the greatest painters of female flesh was Ingres. I think he made the most marvellous images of them, and I think they are probably some of the greatest, in a curious way, the most sexual bodies that have been made of in painting. No man, probably, who didn't love women's flesh would have been able to have painted something as beautiful as a Bantuke.
And do you find the same when you paint?
I have different attitudes to life than to you, and of course, but my attitudes are different.
Do you want to talk about that, or do you not want to?
Well, I can talk about it.
Well, let's talk about it. What attitudes do you have?
I like men. Of course, male flesh is very interesting. It always attracts me, but that's a different thing altogether.
And what attracts you about men?
Just like men. I like their brain, I like the quality of their flesh.
You obviously love Michelangelo's men.
I think the greatest things he ever did were the drawings, but I think they're the greatest drawings that exist.
You've said, I've read that you have said, that he gave the most expansive, you used better words. You said the most...
I tell you what I said. I think he gave the greatest male voluptuousness.
Voluptuousness. That's it. That's the
yes.
Voluptuous.
To the male body.
That's right. That's
than any other man has ever done.
Don't you think it's a bit kind of...
volupté is all we want. Voluptuousness.
Yes, I know. It's wonderful, isn't it?
Isn't it a lovely
Absolutely
word?
amazing. And actually, we want to live in a state of voluptuousness.
How right
That'll
you
do.
are. Whatever it is.
And everything else is a falling away.
Whatever it is, everything else
Is a falling away.
is a falling away.
That's right.
I enjoyed the way he flirted with Melvyn throughout the programme and put Melvyn in a few spots. I thought it was absolutely terrific, as a sort of tour de force.
Are you real? To me, you're real. There you are. There you are, Melvyn Bragg. You are absolutely real to me. There you are, flesh and blood, before me. How are you going to remake that? That's be a real... How are you going to make that in another art?
Why do you want to? That's the interesting question. Why do you want to? Why do you want to?
Because I want to I want to be, you may say, why should you? But I want to be able to remake in another medium the reality of an image that excites me. Cheerio.
Cheerio, Francis. Why do you want to do that, Francis?
Because I like doing it. That's because I happen to be a painter, and that's all.